Coaches. Blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, they can't hold a flame against you, ay. Blow the whistle, blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, got the game, it ain't no issue, yeah. Blowing the whistle, I had enough with you, the championship, it is gone. Ain't listen to you, I can't give it to you, cause you don't know what I've been on. This is the Coaches Podcast.
All right, that was weird. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back into the Fantasy Coaches Podcast. It's been a long time here coming. We've been gone for about a month or so now, right before Christmas hit. We have not done a podcast, so it has been a long time for some of us here. But your coaches are back, guys. We're back here to do all off-season Dynasty content, get you guys ready for the Dynasty off-season, get you guys ready for the rookie drafts that are coming up in May. It's going to be a lot of fun this off-season, guys. And, of course, I am your host, Coach Steve. Let's introduce the crew. Let's start with Coach Jibbs. What is going on today, brother?
You already know what it is, man, but I'm feeling like I'm on top of the world. But, yeah, other than that, I'm here just to slack off, get my, Dynasty insight from these, fabulous guys. Like, Coach John's a genius in Dynasty. Coach Steve's Stefan as well. And then Kyle. Top tier in the business, guys. So definitely want to get some insight from these guys. So definitely listen in, follow in, and I'm ready to get it started, boys.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to have a fun off-season, of course. Coach John, what is going on, brother? Long time no talk.
I know. Long time no talk. Welcome in all the listeners. This is my favorite part of fantasy football is the off-season, the content, the sort of dissecting of what happened in the previous year, what we expect to happen next year, contracts and all this chaos that happens in the offseason. Then you get into rookies. This is fun. So I'm excited. This is day one of the offseason content, which gets me all geared up.
Absolutely. Love that. Love to hear that. And of course, we have our first guest of the new year, Kyle, my friend. What is going on, brother? How are you?
Hey guys, glad to be on. I'm honored that you chose me as the first guest of the. It's weird to say off season because there is still technically one football game left to be played in this season.
Yeah, we still have a big one. Yeah, we still have the big one.
It is the off season.
I don't know if
Coach is getting fired. Nah, Coach is getting fired. It's the off season, baby.
Yeah, it's the off season for 30 other teams. So,
but it's good to have you on, man. How's everything? Everything been good? Hopefully.
Yeah, everything's been great. Packers wise, not so much. They didn't make the playoffs. Your Dolphins did though. Funny that the Packers beat the Dolphins and yet the Dolphins still made the playoffs. The Packers didn't. So football's fun like that sometimes.
I love it.
Sorry that your Christmas day was ruined a little bit though. But yeah, it's been great and exciting playoff games. I think it's the first time in 5 years that the 2 1 seeds have made it to the Super Bowl. So that's
interesting. Yeah,
I think the Eagles Patriots that was the last time. So. I mean that it's bound like you'd expect it to maybe happen more, and that's that long without it was bound to happen again. So,
hey,
5 years later,
I love it. And we're a quick question, Kyle: is Aaron Rodgers a quarterback of your team next year?
I'll optimistically say yes. I'm kind of pretty close to. I don't even want to say 50-50 because I think the chance of him retiring is still strong. I think I counted out to 40-40-20. 40 that'll stay, 40 that'll leave. There was reports that the Packers would only trade him to the NFC or the AFC. So, if you're already cutting out half the league, it makes it so at the very least, I think it's not more likely to be traded than he'll stay. I think it's at this point, it's almost what does Aaron Rodgers want more than anything. So, I know as a Packers fan, and it's funny because I've heard that some chatter, Packers Twitter, other Packers fans, my co-host on the Full Press Packers pod, for instance, kind of just this will he stay, won't he stay? They're almost kind of fed up with it and done to the point where it's just bring on the Jordan Love era. But I don't know. I want to win Super Bowls, and I don't think Jordan Love can do that yet. Maybe I'm wrong. Hopefully I'm wrong if that is the case, if he does start. But I don't know. I'm kind of just pedal to the metal. If with Aaron Rodgers, they have a chance to compete, just take that for every year that he's on the team. So I say just bring him back and figure out how to make the finances work. But obviously, I'm not the GM of the Packers. I don't know if you could get Brian Gutekunst on the show. I don't know.
Well,
we'll get him on next week.
We'll be helpful. We'll be helpful for you. That's for sure. All right, guys. So we have this great group on tonight to talk about some dynasty guys. It's that time of year, guys. Startups are happening. People are getting ready to start trading again and trading for draft picks and all into the between here. So we're going to just jump right into our show today, guys. And of course, we are going to start with my handy dandy PowerPoint, as I always have. Of course, I love my PowerPoints now. The quarterback position here now. Obviously, a guy like Josh Allen, he's a top-tier dynasty quarterback. There isn't really much for us to say. I'm sure each and every single one of us would love to have Aaron Rodgers, Josh Allen on your dynasty team, of course. So we're not going to really talk about Josh Allen. Top-tier player, easy enough and said. But let's talk about the next guy in terms of talent, and I think it's obviously Tua Tagovailoa, my quarterback of my Miami Dolphins now. Tua had himself a pretty interesting season. Obviously, there are reports right now of him dealing with the concussion still after 1 month. Isn't very settling, but he was fantastic at times this season, and he finished QB 14 on the season and minus missing a few games here and there. Kyle, I'll start with you since you're our guest here. Do you want a guy like Tua Tagovailoa on your dynasty team? Are you looking to sell him off? And if so, what are you looking to sell him off for? And vice versa, if you're looking to buy him.
This is dangerous to start with me because I've had a lot of thoughts about Tua, just seeing people talk about their startups and just the overall value of Tua. And I mean, these your rankings, Steve?
No, those are just where the fantasy finishes.
Oh, fantasy finishes.
Just
okay.
Fantasy finishes.
Okay. Wow, Zach Wilson was QB 32. I'm almost surprised he's that high. So with Tua, it's funny because I feel like people kind of have him right around QB 14 in Dynasty. That's why I was wondering if that's what it was, because I feel like that's kind of where he's at. Where I kind of view him still as a top 12 quarterback, and I mean, that's QB 14 overall, but obviously, games missed. If you look at points per game, he did finish in the top 12. So to me, he's someone, especially in the Superflex league. You're saying sell him. I think this is the worst time to sell him. At the very least, wait until you get some report that he's cleared concussion protocol. And that would be the absolute worst time to sell him. Like at this point, just hold him until he clears. I know the one player that I am kind of struggling with in my rankings, who's QB 11, who's QB 12 for me, is Tua and Kyler. And my thinking is, who's going to start more games next year? I'd imagine it's Tua, unless and I guess the only problem is if he still is dealing with concussion problems, then the talk of he might retire is serious. I guess that's really the start, because I don't think he's retiring. Like I'm assuming he starts week 1 next year, and by that point he'll be fine and he'll have had enough time away from football, away from contact to clear that. Maybe I'm wrong, and I think a lot of people now seem kind of really scared off of him. So that's again why it's it's a bad time to sell, because I don't even know if anyone actually wants to buy him right now, which might be the perfect time to buy him. It seems like in startup Superflex, he might be falling 3rd, 4th round. Like if that's his price now, like this almost feels like where Justin Fields was in the offseason last year. And I kicked myself not getting enough Justin Fields, all the risk, but the upside outweighs it, I think. So maybe this offseason is something I traded for Tua too much during the season last year, unfortunately. Now I think about it would have been way better to buy him now as opposed to in season. So I guess I'm not as scared of Tua potentially retiring because of this earlier than, I don't think he's going to retire while on his rookie contract and before he's gotten that second big payday. Because at this point, if he retires now, what's all that? Like all of this would have almost have been for nothing. So I think at this point he's so far in. He loves football, to come back from that devastating hip injury that alone could have derailed his career before it even started. So I think his resiliency to kind of just keep fighting through all that tells me he's probably going to keep fighting once he, is able to come back. And so I don't know. I view Tua as a top 12 quarterback, and my kind of ideology with that in terms of like, would I want him? No, but at the price he's at, you don't even need him as your QB1 right now. Like I think I'd be okay with him as my QB1, but I don't think it's an ideal situation to be in. Like him and Kyler right now, if that's the QB1 you're relying on, that seems like it's a tricky proposition. It could be worth it in the long run, but that would be risky, I think, to go in week 1 as your QB1, but I'd be willing to do it. And because of that, I'm not trading Tua in a Superflex league unless I'm getting another top 12 quarterback back. And at this point, you probably can't, I'd assume it costs more to get Kyler. Like if you wanted to pivot from Tua to Kyler, you'd have to pay for that. So that's probably the only way I'm moving to it, is upgrading to a better quarterback. But I don't want to trade out of the top 12, because I feel like the only chance I have to upgrade it there is with other quarterbacks like a Tua if he bounces back in value. So I wouldn't want to, if you're going to sell Tua in a super flex league, make sure you're getting a quarterback back. And it's got to be like, wouldn't be any of these other, well, I mean, if you can get up to Josh Allen, that's great, but none of the other quarterbacks listed here. Like, I don't want to go down to Mac Jones. Definitely don't want to go to the Jets' best quarterback, which is Mike White, actually, not Zach Wilson.
That is true. Yeah. No, I like your take on that one too. Obviously, the Dolphins.
Sorry, I ranted so much, guys, but there you go.
Okay. I'm thinking a lot to say about Tua, so I had to give you that. So I actually did a startup. I'm in the middle of one right now that Tua and Kyler both went in round 3, so it's definitely interesting. Coach Jibbs, my friend, over to you. How do you feel about Tua overall? Are you nervous to maybe just sell out from him now and just say not to deal with the situation no matter what, or are you kind of more with Kyler right now?
I don't have Tua personally, but I think like injury aside, he played phenomenal this year with his 2 stud receivers. Like if you put anyone else in that situation, you will figure like they probably could have some elite numbers like Tua had. But like there's also speculation of maybe like Miami get another quarterback. You just never know things. So in the short term, it's just kind of cloudy with the Miami Dolphins, and like that does create a buyer's market, especially people who are concerned with Tua's compounding concussion history. So like in the long term, I'm probably not going to want to on any of my dynasty teams, but people who like to trade and like to finesse things, like try to ride the wave. Like if you buy them low or a little bit right now, and then you could pay up just like and get like a bigger return. So like I think like if anything, I'll probably keep an eye on Tua because I think it's a buyer's window.
All right, Coach John, my friend, how do you feel on Tua in a nutshell?
So I agree with what Jibbs and Kyle said. And to Kyle's point, the concussions are a concern. But the best thing for a concussion, and the problem with concussions is they compound. And once you get one, it's easier to get a second and a third and a fourth. The best thing for him is rest. So this offseason, when he's out of football contact, when he's out of workouts and all this, and he really gets time to heal, and that swelling comes down in his brain, he won't be so glass jawed with it. I think we're going to go back to Tua being a stud. I mean, he looked great at the beginning of the season. He had 2 of the most dynamic weapons in the NFL on one team, a great play caller. So, I think now is a time to buy. You have the chance. People don't want Tua. People are scared of Tua. I get it. I would be too, but luckily we don't have to start him for fantasy for like 8 months. So like, yeah, it's scary right this second, but you got to think, in September, is it still going to be an issue? And it's probably not. Now if he comes out early next season in week 3, has another concussion, you're like, all right, this poor guy is just going to suffer with these his whole career. And then it's a different assessment. But I think heading into this offseason, take advantage of the scared players out there. And like Kyle said, if you can slot him in as your QB2, in a super flex league with that upside that he has with, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, I think that's great. Pair him with, someone a little bit more steady, kind of locked into that top 10 role. And then you pair him up with someone who's got a ton of variance and a ton of upside in Tua. I love it. So I'm not, if I have Tua, I'm certainly not selling him at this point. You're going to get pennies on the dollar. So hang on to him, see how the offseason goes, see what happens. If you want to buy him, now's kind of the time to buy him. Don't wait until, summertime, because then people will kind of be off of that and they'll forget all about the concussions. They'll forget all about the time missed and all that. So now is the time to strike if you're taking that chance on Tua.
Yeah, I think you guys all make fantastic points. That's why I like you guys, because as a Dolphins fan, I love to hear that. But just real quick, I mean, yeah, this is definitely time to buy. If you're trying to sell, it's just a terrible time because no one wants them. No one wants to deal with the concussions because that's the headline right now. The best thing to do is to try to buy if you want. I mean, it's risky, of course. The concussions, we just don't know. I mean, trying to offer maybe 2 second-round picks, maybe a second, and maybe Kenny Pickett or Mac Jones. Obviously, if you could get them off your team and get 2 of them, maybe someone's nervous that much about the concussions. And try to go that approach in terms of an actual trade value with Tua. But it's definitely a buyer time, like everyone's mentioned. But trying to sell right now, you're just not getting your money's worth. You might as well wait until we know the concussions are done. And hopefully they are, and we'll see what happens. So on to some other quarterbacks here in this, obviously, division. We have Zach Wilson and Mac Jones, both starters from the 2020 draft, I think, right? 2020?
Mm-hmm.
I think so. Yeah, 2020. Zach Wilson for second overall has done garbage. Obviously, we've known that. Mac Jones, he's kind of like a low end, mid range QB too, but like he doesn't really tip the boat for us in terms of fantasy. Do you believe these guys are still? Do you believe either one of them have starter appeal after the 2023 season? Jibs, I'll let you start with this one. Do you believe like it's time to get these? I mean, I don't think anyone wants Zach Wilson. But maybe you could still get Mac Jones off your team. Do you believe either one of them are starters after 2023?
I think Mac Jones got a chance, to be honest. Like, he's gonna get Bill O'Brien back. Like, I don't think like I'll ever say that in my life again. But like, I think that would be like a nice little guy in his ear to get him like back on set like he was in his rookie year. So like, I think Mac Jones isn't gonna be like a phenomenal. He's not gonna. I don't think he's gonna get to that high end QB. Two numbers, but I think he'll be settled. I think he'll settle in enough that he could be like at least like a better Daniel Jones, in a way, or on a Daniel Jones kind of level. So like, it is what it is. But like at the QB2 spot, you're just trying to get like some quality production, and I think he could probably find some stability with Bill O'Brien this year, rather than the Milt Hunter, Zach Wilson. I don't think he has a shot anywhere.
Yeah, I'm very upset about that. Obviously, I had invested a lot in him last off season, hoping for the best, but obviously it hasn't been that great. John, you are the resident New England Patriot fan here. Obviously, we all can agree Zach Wilson is garbage, but in terms of Mac Jones, is there still an appeal that maybe this offseason with the money you guys have that he could still be a valuable fantasy quarterback, not still?
Yeah, I think this is the problem with Mac Jones, and this is the whole draft season a few years ago when we think about it. The problem is Mac Jones he's limited with his upside. He'll never evolve into this, Justin Fields, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes. He's just limited in what he can do. He can operate an offense. He can throw the ball when guys are open. He can time things up well. I think Bill O'Brien coming in is going to help him, but ultimately, Mac Jones is just quarterback 16 through 20. That's just who he is. And so I think what we got from Mac Jones is probably the worst we'll see. I don't think we'll get another season like this past season. So, a steady low-end quarterback too. He could be Derek Carr for the next few years. I don't, again, that's realistic, but that doesn't win you fantasy championships. That guy doesn't he doesn't win you a week or any of that. I think he's still going to be viable. He's still going to have a role in New England. And even after his rookie contract, he'll probably sign somewhere and be a starter. But again, I just think the upside is super limited for fantasy. So I'm not like chomping at the bit to get him on my roster. And again, trading him away, you're probably not going to get enough where it's really worth trading him away if you're in any sort of super flex. So you're just kind of stuck with them. You got to kind of ride him out, use him for bye weeks, use him for a quarterback 2 fill in, stuff like that. It's fine. Zach Wilson, on the other hand, I can't imagine he's playing for New York much longer. I can't imagine any other team really wants him. I mean, I think that was just a miss by the NFL. I think that was just a miss in terms of drafting, in terms of, I don't know. New York has never been, or the Jets have never been great at developing talent and never been great at developing quarterbacks. So I knew that the situation was kind of screwed from the get-go, but I don't see another team taking on that project and saying, yeah, we're going to salvage Zach Wilson's career. Any team is just going to say, yeah, we'll take our chance in the draft, let Zach Wilson kind of peter out. And I think that's probably what's going to end up happening.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you on that. Kyle, we'll wrap things up with these quarterbacks here. Obviously, you think we can agree that Zach Wilson is just a no-go in terms of life, unless you think differently. But Mac Jones, I
don't want to say Zach Wilson will never start another NFL game, because I think he's so young that at some point he might develop. But it seems like there's a lot of mental stuff as well as the physical rigors of playing NFL that he still has to grasp. It looks like so. Right. I mean, he can always evolve and get better and eventually start. But yeah, I think right now like dynasty wise, I would say, it's impossible to sell him almost. You have to hold him and know that you're maybe holding him for years before you get to use him again. And that might be a scary proposition. Just if it's a deep enough bench, you don't really care about one roster spot, but if it's shallow enough, that might be where it gets really scary. I think with Mac Jones, John hit it perfectly, talking about like top 20 quarterback for Mac Jones, but doesn't seem like he ever has much chance to get into the top 12. So perpetual QB2. And again, weekly, that the floor is just super low with him. I think the ceiling, I mean, he is top 12 ceiling kind of on any given week under the right circumstances. Now, last year definitely weren't the right circumstances. And to Jib's point, Bill O'Brien coming back. Look, I think we can criticize Bill O'Brien for basically, John might like this reference, he's basically the Mike Milbury of the NFL. Should not be a GM, probably the worst general manager we've ever seen, completely torpedoed a team. It's going to take them probably decades to get out of. Sorry, Houston. But unlike Mike Milbury, Bill O'Brien's actually a good coach. And specifically, I would say an elite level offensive play caller, at least offensive coordinator. And I think head coach pretty good. Got some teams to the playoffs after all. But I think just getting an incredible play caller, B, an actual play caller with experience, unlike Matt Patricia. And I'm going to end the talk here because I could rant about Patricia for days. The one thing I'll say is genius Matt Patricia. I mean, is he really that much of a genius? Because as soon as he left, Belichick got his son to call plays, and the Patriots defense has been fine ever since. I think the problem with Mac Jones, though, it's not just coaching, it was talent as well. And if they lose their best receiver in Jacoby Myers to free agency, their receiver core is actually worse than it was last year. So how are they going to invest in the position? I think get him one or two better wide receivers, I think. But at the very least, you got to add at least one talented wide receiver to get in there and be a true wide receiver one, especially if you're losing Jacoby Myers. If you can retain Myers, you can maybe mitigate that, but I think they still have to add. But I think more than getting Bill O'Brien, I think the wide receiver position is going to determine if he has that kind of ceiling to maybe be a top 15 quarterback. And again, I think the best thing to do with him might be what John was saying is as a QB2 or QB3 in tandem with another QB2. If you've got a solid, like a top 12 QB as your QB1, you can maybe patchwork with two others. And with Mac Jones, you're just kind of playing the matchups with him and that other QB, and you're kind of going back and forth on a weekly basis. Because he does have, again, good high ceiling in matchups, but Mac Jones' floor, I shouldn't call him Mac floor, because his floor is basically non-existent. Like, he's got no mobility, and if they ever get into a game script where they can just run the ball a ton, they will. So he's got one of the lowest floors of any locked-in starting quarterback, because it feels like he's locked in to start throughout his rookie contract, and then from there he probably will continue to start.
Right, I think that's the best way to describe it. I mean, he's probably got at least three. I bet that he's there for at least 3 more seasons, and then they're kind of make a decision on him because he was a first-round pick, so he'll get that 5th-year option more than likely. Again, he was QB9 the final 3 weeks of the season, over 20 fantasy points each in those weeks. I mean, if they do get, the offensive coordinator thing fixed, obviously with Bill O'Brien now, and if they get some offense that has some talent, Mac Jones has a chance. So, I mean, this could be the time to buy, because once they, sign somebody back or draft somebody, Mac Jones' value might go up a little bit more than you want to spend on him. So if you really want to get him and take that possible, low-term investment that could be decent, it's the time to do it. Maybe 2 second-round picks will get Mac Jones on your team if you really wanted him. Maybe, getting rid of Rodgers or someone older and getting Mac Jones and a high pick back or something like that, or another player, just because you want to have a youth and see if that QB2 helps you out in the future. It's possible for Mac Jones. He's got potential, probably, again, not top 12 upside because I don't think he has the mobility, but he's got potential for a high-end QB2 still, but he needs that offense if it's going to work. But this is the time to buy now. Mm-hmm. All right. Over to the RBs. There's a lot of things going here with RBs. Obviously, the Bills have Singletary, James Cook, Nyheim Hines. Miami had Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson, who were both free agents. The Jets, obviously, Breece Hall is a star in the making. Michael Carter, Zonovan Knight, James Robinson is likely gone off this team. And obviously, the Patriots with Ramondre Stevenson with a breakout year. Damian Harris is a free agent. And 2 young guys, and Kevin Harris and Pierre Strong Jr. Now, obviously, let's start with probably the most talented running back in this class, in this group here, and it's obviously Breece Hall, who got hurt week 7, torn ACL. Seemed like he's scheduled to come back week 1, but again, we don't know. Hopefully, that happens, but we just don't know. Again, in terms of a contending team right now, say you're a contender and you have Breece Hall on your team, would you consider selling off Breece Hall to get maybe something else on your team because you're concerned about the injuries, or you just ACL tears are just a thing of the past at this point? You're just going to hold on to Breece Hall no matter what, or maybe you guys want to dip into this RB class. This is supposed to be a really good RB class instead. How do you guys feel about Breece Hall in terms of a contender? John, we'll start with you.
Same with like the Tua conversation. I wouldn't be trading Brees right now because you're just going to get pennies on the dollar. He's injured. You have to deal with the whole off season. People aren't buying stud running backs right now. So I would, if you have them, you got to hang on to them till at least, training camp and shows signs of health or whatever. And then buzz will come back around him. And then if you want to try and trade for him, go for it. Or if you want to, like you said, if you want to try and trade him for a rookie pick and try and dip into this year's class, then maybe wait towards the rookie draft. But I love Breece Hall. I love the talent. I think he showed enough. I'm not worried about the ACL tear anymore. This isn't 1995. I think there's enough medical sort of, advancements now that we've seen people come back from ACL tears and be absolutely fine and just beat it off like it's no problem. So I'm okay. If you're a contender, hanging on to Breece Hall, get him cooking again. Because when he was running well, he took over that offense. Him and Garrett Wilson are going to be superstars next year. I don't care who your quarterback's going to be. Those two will figure it out and be good offensive weapons. And it's hard. We talk about all the time. It's hard to find 3-down workhorse backs in the NFL. It's just the league is just sort of getting away from that. So I think Breece Hall is still one of those guys who's probably 350 plus touches, and that's worth a lot in fantasy. That's worth a lot. And so I'm hanging on to Breece Hall. It would take a lot for me to trade him away at this point. I think he's even injured. I still think he's probably a top, 8 dynasty back. Even injured, I'd still take him in that ballpark. So it would be hard to get Breece Hall from me if I had him.
I respect it. I like it. I like the take there. Kyle, over to you, my friend. With Breece Hall, I'm going to ask you a slightly different question here. If you could get eventually selling off Breece Hall, again, in terms of a contender, and you'd have to trade your pick and try to get up and maybe get one of those elite running backs in this class here without going into detail about them too much. But would you do that, or do you trust that Breece Hall can make that recovery and be an elite back for you?
Yeah, it's interesting because the way you posed it, is Breece Hall a sell as a contender? I think yes, in the theory that he probably this might be the worst season he produces in terms of points per game of his entire rookie contract. Is this upcoming here in 2023? Obviously, total points. I mean, you have it there. He was RB 42 last year, but when he was on the field, he was producing like crazy. So expect probably a dip in production this year. So as a contender, it would in theory make sense to sell him. But then thinking from a contender, I also think there's maybe traps to get into. The one thing I'll start with, I definitely don't want to do is buy older running backs with Breece Hall. I don't want to just go buy, I don't know, even a
Dalvin Cook.
Well, it's funny because I was thinking Cook and Mixon and Jones, but I think the value of Breece Hall right now is so much higher than them that's all. The deal with them is what are you getting extra? You have to get so much to the point where they're almost the secondary piece. Can I get them and an elite wide receiver where I'm really paying for that elite wide receiver, and Dalvin Cook's kind of a throw-in, right?
Sure.
So I think
weird to hear that.
I don't know if those managers are willing to do that, right? So it's got to be if it's cheap enough, sure. I think the risk I was thinking of is an Eckler or McCaffrey, because those guys are so valued right now. Are you even really getting much on top of Hall? Are you even having to add to Hall to get them right now? Because those managers, especially if they're contending, they may view Hall as something they don't want. So I don't really want to go and buy older running backs. I think if I'm thinking running back, the one guy I want to just buy is Kenneth Walker. I'm toying between him and Jonathan Taylor as the RB1 overall in Dynasty. I don't know how many people are talking about Ken Walker as the Dynasty RB1. I hear a lot of people still going back to Taylor. I mean, there was tons of talk about Breece Hall being the RB1 when he was producing in season. And then maybe some people just saying it's McCaffrey and Eckler because of what they did. Production-wise, their points are so high that's the first running back I want to grab in a startup. But I feel like Ken Walker's the guy that I might consider the Dynasty RB1. So if I could buy Walker, I'd maybe do that. As a contender, I think I almost want to buy 24 picks more than 23 picks, because as a contender, what I can do is I can sell those 24 picks in season to buy players. If I buy a 23 pick, I've got to make that rookie pick right now. And unless it's an early one, say a Bijan Robinson, sure. If I can flip Breece Hall to get the 101, I'm doing that, no problem. Again, that's all about what do you have to add to Hall to get that 101 and take Bijan Robinson, who might be as strong, if not better, a prospect than Hall. You get him a year early, and most importantly, doesn't have the ACL tear. So there's select ways I'm doing it. If I can get out a Hall to get an elite wide receiver, I think I talked about that earlier. Does Amon-Ra St. Brown cost? Is he still low enough in value where like Hall to Amon-Ra is barely anything in between? Like, do I throw in a third to Hall and I get that done? I think I'd be really tempted to do that. Because as a contender, it doesn't really matter if it's a running back or wide receiver. That's points in my lineup that you're probably not getting with Hall. So I think there are specific types of trades I'd like to do with Hall, but there's also types of trades I don't want to do at all. Yeah, rhyme there.
I like the way you phrased all that. That was really good. Coach Gibbs, over to you, my friend. With Breece Hall, Kyle kind of mentioned it, like the slip in production. Does that kind of scare you in general, like off of a Breece guy like Breece Hall this year, or do you think the talent, will make its way back quicker than normal?
I want to say make its way back as normal. You see some of these guys, it takes some time. So I think like he might find some mid-season form as he was kind of doing before he tore the ACL like he did in his rookie year. So I'm still on Breece Hall. I want him on my team. Like there's, like you're saying, there's like a lot of these staple running backs like Cook, Chubb, they're all getting older. Mixon, like I won't say Mixon to a degree, but like what I'm saying, like these guys are all getting older, and like you need some young assets on your team, and like he looks stellar, and like the Jets could be a good team. They could be a better team. You just don't know, and like don't do anything now. Like everyone says, like wait till the off season progresses, see how the news goes, like see how the draft goes, and then if you get pieces fall right, man, like Breece Hall might be in a stellar situation. So, yeah, I'll need like the house. Jibs ain't giving them up for free.
No, I definitely get it. I mean, Hall is like an interesting guy. He's RB6 before he tore his ACL. Like you just said, Jibs, the Jets offense could be better if they do get that elite quarterback. So it could end up being a really good thing for Hall. Like maybe early on in the season, it takes time. But then by mid-season, he's getting going again. So if someone's willing to sell off on Breece Hall now because of the injury, I'm willing to buy. In terms of a contender, I don't want to sell yet unless it makes sense. Obviously, if I can get the 101 out of it and get B.J. Robinson on my team, well, then that might be a different story, especially as a contender. But it's going to be interesting. Definitely a good time to buy Hall. Sell Hall if you're only getting a really good deal out of it that makes sense for you as a contender. Don't just do it just to get an injured player off your team, because he will heal and he will be effective at some point in 2023. We just don't know how long that's going to take. So. All right, over to the next running back here. Ramondre Stevenson had himself a breakout year, finished obviously as RB10 on the season here. Now, Kyle, is he a dynasty RB1 in your eyes?
Man, I love Ramondre. Actually, let me pull up my rankings real quick because I think he's right on the borderline of that. I think I would say no. Draft capital, the team he's on, there's some things working against him. Yeah, right now I have him at 14. Right behind Cam Akers and J.K. Dobbins. Like I could easily put him above them. And so, yeah, I could see it being there. I also don't have the rookies in my rankings yet. So, yeah, once this rookie class comes in, I think that's too many players in front of him and in the top 12. So, I'd be willing to say top 15. But, yeah, I think Dynasty RB1, meaning top 12, I think that's just a little too high.
I respect
Good question, though, because I think it is close.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, he finishes an RB1, but we'll see what happens.
Yep.
Obviously, all the rookies and everything in between, injuries. Coach Gibbs, how do you feel about Ramondre Stevenson? Is he a dynasty RB1 right now in your eyes?
I don't think so. He performed like it though last year, and I could see his role either progressing or kind of being stagnant. Like they may have another piece that's going to come in and then take some work off him like they always do. So I think Ramondre Stevenson will probably be a middle tier RB2, and I like that kind of running back. He's a good person to have if everyone's going to go goo and Gaga over the RB1. So
I know John wants to butt in. Unlike all the players we've talked about, though, this is the time to sell Ramondre. Of all the players we've talked about, we're talking about this is the worst time to sell. This might be one of the few running backs who's right now had a positive trajectory. The draft hasn't come yet, and we don't know what the Patriots will do in the draft. So the time to sell Ramondre might be between now and the draft. Not to say that he's going to fall off because of that, but I could see his value decline. Unlike, John mentioned earlier, this, most people don't want to buy running backs right now, but he might be one of the few who, just because of the way the breakout season happened, I think it's a new fresh face. We're seeing it RB10 right in the top 12, not something we expected. So still on his rookie contract, still young. I could see people wanting to buy him right now as opposed to a bunch of other running backs.
Yeah, no, I love that there because I was just going to mention that too to Coach Johnny, who is the resident Patriots guy here. After a stellar season, John, is this his ceiling that we just saw, his best year to come? I mean, do you think he can be better and actually a real dynasty RB1, or was that it this year?
No, I think this is kind of it. I think what you saw was, perfect situation. There were a lot of dump offs. There was a lot of touchdowns. I think Ramondre's a great player. Don't get me wrong. But if I had to guess, if I had to fast forward into my rankings, Ramondre Stevenson will be higher in my 2023 redraft rankings than he will be in my dynasty rankings. Like, you know what I'm saying? He's one of those players that, yeah, for sure, I'll take him on my team next year. Damian Harris is gone. Kevin Harris and Pierre Strong aren't going to be big enough pieces to really take over a lot of that backfield. But like 2 years from now, 3 years from now, I have no idea what Bill in New England's going to do with that running back. Ramondre could be gone. I have no idea. So I don't know if he's a big dynasty asset, but he for sure will have a great season next season. Like I can tell you that. He's probably a top 12 redraft player next year. But dynasty, when you start factoring in all the upcoming, the Bijan Robinsons, all the incoming rookies, all these guys, J.K. Dobbins starting to, come to form at the end of the year, all this stuff that factors into dynasty when you play in dynasty. I think there's just more that can go wrong with Ramondre. This was kind of it. Like, RB10 was great. I just don't know if that's going to be repeatable for the next 3, 4, 5. Like when Nick Chubb came in, we're like, okay, this is going to be the guy for the foreseeable future. Like, I don't look at Ramondre and say, oh, New England looks at Ramondre and says, yep, this is our guy. Lock him in, give him a contract. Like, I just, that's not who New England is. That's not how they play the game. They never will. They'll just always rotate day 3 guys in. It's how they are. It's just, Mike Gillislee came in and scored a bazillion touchdowns in 2 games, and then we never heard from him ever again. So, it can happen in New England, and it can happen quick. So, that's a long way of saying, no, he's not a dynasty RB1. But he's good. He's a great player. He's a great asset. But he's just not a dynasty. I wouldn't mess around with dynasty.
That's the thing with Ramondre Stevenson, is that if it was a different team, I think I would really 100% based on how he played and everything that he did this year, I'd be like, yeah, he's a dynasty RB1 right now. I mean, he's not any older than Jonathan Taylor is, and
just sucks. He's on New England.
He's on New England.
And they hate successful running backs. As far back as Lawrence Maroney. I mean, I can keep going. You want me to keep going back? I can keep.
They don't care about running back. Anyone can run the ball in New England. It doesn't matter who it is. Obviously, Damian Harris won't get re-signed. I bet you that. So,
Damian Harris is gone. It's just
definitely a good time to sell right now. He had a fantastic year. Can't take that away from him. But everything we know about New England there, it's just a good time to sell. Even though it might be a pretty solid 2023 season still, you just don't know. So definitely a good time to sell off on him. A guy maybe you guys want to buy into right now, James Cook, running back of the Buffalo Bills. Really caught on at the end of the season and really started getting more work, seeing very high yards per carry totals on the season here. Is he somebody who's a star on the rise, or are you not really going to buy into James Cook because maybe Buffalo goes and drafts somebody, maybe they sign someone? I mean, maybe Devin Singletary comes back. He is a free agent. Are you guys buying into James Cook? Jibs, I'll start with you, buddy.
No.
No.
The Buffalo Bills just haven't shown me anything otherwise. Is that they're going to be a passing offense and a way more unbalanced offense in favor of passing. Like, yeah, he could get like some the catches, and like if he has the complete backfield and they don't sign anyone, or they just promote 99 Hines as a second RB, sure, I'll buy right into James Cook. But I just know like the last 3 years, like Devin Singletary, he's trying to be that guy. We were on the Zach Moss train for a couple of minutes. None of these guys have been earth shatter and RB1s. So like he does have the best profile, I would think, as a 3-down back, like with his receiving skills out of the bunch. But like Buffalo has to show me offensively because I don't believe him.
I respect it. I definitely get that. Coach John, how about you feel about the situation here? Are you with Gibbs, or are you looking to get a guy like James Cook?
I'm looking to add James Cook. I was looking to add James Cook all during the season, last season. Like I love the player. You know, I love the situation. You know, I kind of read the writing on the wall that Devin Singletary probably wasn't going to come back next season. So, buying in on players a little, I would rather buy in on a player a little early and have to sit on them and wait than wait till the breakout happens and then have to overpay for a guy. So getting in on James Cook now, by week 6 next season, we might look at ourselves and go, oh, we have a top 24 week in, week out running back. Like, this is great. Not saying he's going to be an RB1, but he could be a CEH. He could be a, middle of the pack, back end 1, high end 2. Like, James Cook certainly has that ability. He has the pass catching ability. He has that sort of big playability that we always look for and talk about, kind of one of those one touch guys that all it takes is one play and he's 60 yards in the house. And you're like, all right, great. The rest of this day for fantasy points is just gravy. So, and again, he's tied to a great offense and tied to, an awesome quarterback and all those things. So I'm in on James Cook. I think you can get him relatively inexpensive for dynasty assets, for dynasty players. Maybe this is the time you get out of one of your older running backs. You get James Cook plus, maybe this is kind of that time to gear down towards younger. Maybe you can get James Cook and
what about trading away Ramondre Stevenson and getting James Cook in a second?
Yep. 100%. That's a great trade.
What about straight up James Cook for Drew?
No, I don't know about straight up. I mean, closer. But you could get James Cook and a wide receiver. Give me James Cook and Christian Kirk, maybe, right? For an older veteran running back. These types of things that, like, that's how you got to kind of, work some of these deals sometimes. Sometimes it's not just a straight this for that. Maybe you're like, all right, well, what if I get a couple pieces out of this? But James Cook is one of those guys that I think next season, we're in the middle of the season, and he's on the rise and he's on a great offense and he's, scoring touchdowns, getting 4, 5, 6 targets a game. And we're sitting there going, we should have seen this coming, right? Like that to me is just how I think the James Cook experience is going to go, where we're all going to speculate. What if Buffalo drafts a guy? What if Buffalo signs a guy? And then lo and behold, it's just going to be, James Cook, Nyheim Hines, and, maybe a couple other, they go get a free agent or two and piece it. Because, to Jim's point, they've never had this workhorse stud running back. That's not how they're built. They're built through the air. They're built through Josh Allen and Diggs. And so they're not going to go spend money on a 300 touch guy. They're not. They're going to rotate with a bunch of other guys. So give me the guy who is pass catching and big playability in that backfield. And that's James Cook.
Okay. I like it. Kyle, what do you have to say on James Cook overall?
Yeah, I'm definitely closer to Jib's side of no, I don't want to buy him. But I will say I don't disagree with John's process, because he said one thing that vastly changes our perspective on it. He says he likes James Cook as a player. I did not like James Cook as a prospect and was shocked when he went in the second round. So I raised him up in the rookie rankings last year just because of the draft capital, not because of my belief in his profile. So he's not the type of guy I want to buy. I also think, you said it, John, it's always been a committee in Buffalo. I don't think James Cook's ever going to be the guy alone. They're never going to give him 20 touches a game. Singletary was the better back last year, and they still, put Cook in at times. Now, does that mean they re-sign Singletary? If they do, then I have a hard time seeing Cook overtaking him to be the RB1 on the team, or at least the starter, because it seems like, Cook has time to be better, but Singletary seemed like the better guy. When the games are closer, that was the guy they relied on, both in the running game and in the passing game too. So I think the passing upside is kind of there with all three of them running back. So I think that the problem is there's never a clear defined role. All three of them can do every role. So you don't know, oh, this guy's the goal line back. So if it's a weak run defense, you play him that week because they'll get the touchdown. Okay, this, like, if James Cook's really the only pass catcher and he can get 50 targets, okay, play him in the shootout weeks. But I don't think that's ever going to be the case. It's not the type of committee we like. Like, the one thing with the Patriots committee, we at least knew what the roles were. And I mean, the thing with Ramondre, he now has the two most valuable roles, the pass catcher and the goal line guys. He didn't have to choose. But normally it's been a divide with that New England. So you at least knew if the game script was this, it should be this guy. If it's this guy. And of course, football's so hard to predict. But I don't know. I don't really want to invest in a Buffalo running back because my other fear is if they do move on from Singletary, it's because they want to upgrade. And they're probably going to bring in someone that they view as a better running back than anyone on this team. So I think if you're going to buy James Cook, wait till after the draft. Because I think, if everything passes, they haven't invested serious free agency capital or serious draft capital, and he is kind of at the top of that depth chart. Okay, I'll buy it then before he's really started producing in the season. And like you mentioned that earlier, John, like you want to buy players before the breakout. If you do it after the draft, it's still before that points breakout. And maybe he gets a value uptick and it costs a little more after the draft, but I'd rather pay that little bit more if I got the certainty. I don't want to buy into him now and then have someone like leapfrog him as the RB1 on the team. And suddenly what I paid is even too expensive then. So if you're going to buy Cook, I say not the time to buy. You have a few players, but also know what the time to buy is. I think right after the draft will be the time to buy. Either they don't get anyone and you know he's the RB1, or they do draft someone and his price drops. And then that's a great time to buy because everyone will be down on him.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a nice way to put it, Kyle. But, why buy like for a little bit less now when you can buy for a little bit more with the certainty that he is going to be their full-time starter? I like that a lot there. I mean, I'm still willing to buy now if the price is right, because I do like James Cook a lot in terms of his ability when he gets the ball in his hand, the explosiveness that he shows us. But you're right. It's a lot of uncertainty with the free agency and the draft going through. Once those are done, and if he shows up as a starter, yeah, people are going to want to buy into him a little bit more. You might have to pay a little bit more, but you know that he probably has a good chance of being really good next season if he does get that starting job. So I'm buying it, but yeah. So let's see. Out of Hall, Stevenson, Cook, Singletary, the rest of the guys that you might see on this list here, real quick, is there anyone else you're willing to like go out and buy, you have interest in?
Tying to Breece Hall's injury, I'd be okay buying both Michael Carter and Zonovan Knight, thinking they'll get work early in the season. Yeah. I don't think the Jets are probably going to invest too heavily in the running back position. They probably believe long-term in Hall, so they're not going to go and draft another running back in the second round. And even then, I mean, they had 3 first-round picks, so they could kind of have their our early second's almost kind of a luxury pick too. Like, I don't think they're going to be in that position. So assuming they don't invest, it's a running back room of Michael Carter, Zonovan Knight. Like, those are, I almost wonder is Michael Carter even cheaper than Zonovan Knight now? Like, he might be the best buy just because everyone, Zonovan Knight overtook him in the sense, but he really just took over because of an injury. If everyone's healthy, do they still go back to Michael Carter? I wonder. So I think if I had to buy anyone here, it might be Carter, thinking you can buy him cheap now for cheap production early in the season and maybe even flip him early in the season because he's producing. But not someone I don't think you'll be able to rely on either as a league winner to help you in the fantasy playoffs, because we expect by that point that's when Breece Hall is going to take over. But those early season wins can still be important to help you get to the playoffs.
Right. Mm-hmm. You guys feel anyone else there in particular?
I'm the only one that makes me curious is what does Miami do with their backfield? Do they re-sign one of these two guys? Then I might be, I think you could get either one relatively cheap in Dynasty and get a good plug and play for 2023. But we just have no idea what Miami is going to do with that backfield.
Another offseason where we're convinced Miami's taking a running back early and they won't. And once again, it feels like they will this year though, guys. I swear.
We don't have
Bijan Robinson's going to be Bijan's going to be on the board. We're all going to be flipping out, and they're going to take some safety. It's going to be.
I mean, is Bijan going to be on the board when Miami picks?
57, definitely not.
Maybe not. I don't know. Do we think that, this is a totally different conversation for a different day, but do we still think that, after sort of these, Saquon Barkley and Leonard Fournette and Zeke experiments, do teams fall back in that, let's take a running back top 10? It's I don't know. I don't think I think the days of that are
I
kind
doubt
of
it.
limited. So I think high, even Bijan Robinson, who's a supreme talent, supreme prospect, I think high would be low teens. I think if he goes in the teens, I'm like, all right, that's a big pick.
I think that's that
Probably.
scenario. So
Like Brees Hall seemed almost as good of a prospect, and he went early second. So yeah,
Right,
your point,
right.
John, that might be
Yeah,
That's
I think
the new
this is going to
running
be
back.
the standard is back of the first, early second will be like the pick for the first running back off the board. I just think that's where NFL teams are valuing the position
I know
right
the
now.
Cardinals pick early. I was wondering if like that was the team that was going to do it, and just because it's the Cardinals and they make bad decisions. But then Steve Keim got fired, so they might actually GM who knows what he's doing. They didn't hire Bill O'Brien as GM, right?
hey, Dolphins fan here, ask any questions. I love it.
Yeah,
Dolphins
so
fan named Kyle. That's a mix of me and Steve. That's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, Kyle, what's the Dolphins record next year? All right, boys. Let's get over to these wide receivers here. We're short on time here.
Sorry,
Obviously for the wide receiver corps, we have the Bills with Diggs, Gabriel Davis, Isaiah McKenzie, Khaled Shakir. Miami has obviously Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, some other scrub name guys at this point. Personally, that's how I feel about them. New York Jets obviously have Garrett Wilson, Elijah Moore, Corey Davis, Denzel Mims, Barrios. And in New England, obviously Jacoby Myers, a free agent. They just drafted Tyquan Thornton, Devontae Parker, Nelson Aguilar, Kendrick Bourne. A lot of different things here. Kyle said Barkley. We need to have a quarter after that. I hope we get Barkley. That'd be awesome.
That'd be easy.
Yeah, he
That
said
would be crazy.
looking to acquire Barkley. I would love that, Kyle. So let's start
They
with
won't
some
draft
old
one
heads
again,
here.
just to fill that prophecy. They'll just sign one.
Yeah,
By Jeff Wilson.
of course. All right, let's start with the old heads. Tyreek Hill and Stephon Diggs, obviously the old heads of this group here, who are obviously very talented over the age of 27. Both of them, obviously. Which one do y'all prefer in Dynasty right now? Hill or Diggs? I think we're on John now. Which one?
I mean, they're both awesome. I'll take Diggs just because tied to Josh Allen, and I feel a little bit more secure with Josh Allen's future than I do Tua's. But I mean, they're both top 3. I mean, dynasty wide receiver. They're both amazing. So you're fine either way. But I guess I would probably lean Diggs just because quarterback security.
All right. Kyle, what about you?
It's funny because before the season, I was definitely in on Diggs above Hill because of that, tied to Josh Allen. I wasn't sure how good Hill would be without Mahomes, but again, back to if I'm betting on Tua to be okay, Hill looked great with Tua. So I think I don't know, with the way things ended with Buffalo in the playoffs, I wonder if Diggs' role on that team isn't as safe. Like, is that something where, maybe after this contract, they just say it's not worth the hassle. And it's something he's only tied to Josh Allen for another year or two.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think I'd rather go Tyreek Hill. I think I've got them one spot apart in my dynasty rankings. I think they're wide receiver 6 and 7 in dynasty. So to John's point, yeah, pretty happy with either. Still a wide receiver 1 in my eyes, but I think Hill leapfrog Diggs for me this season.
I like it, honestly. Jibs, what about you? Diggs or Hill?
I'm going with John. Diggs with the Josh Allen stability, and I just think like speedy wide receivers get slower, and I think of Diggs more of like a nice. I think they both are quality possession receivers and whatnot, but I just think Diggs will have like more use long term rather than Hill kind of like falling off. Dude,
the one thing I'll say to that is Deshaun Jackson still looks pretty fast.
I don't care how fast he looks. Some hammies, he's different.
Well, yeah, no,
different story,
that's his own issue. But I mean, Usain Bolt, when still the fastest man in the world in his mid-30s, I kind of think speed doesn't disappear. I think the thing that disappears is more the contested catch, the strong guys. They can't outmuscle the younger players anymore as they get older. But I think the speed guys remain speed guys, and I also like how Hill's role has evolved. He's not just a deep threat anymore. Like even his last year in Kansas City, they used him a lot underneath, yards after the catch. And I think that's something that can sustain long term. But to your point, Jibs, Diggs is such a great route runner that's never going to go away. He's never been the fastest guy, but still pretty fast. And I don't think he's going to slow down necessarily either. So
and that's why I'm also on the Diggs. I'm like they're like actually back to back in my rankings right now, but just because of the quarterback and obviously what Diggs is able to do, his floor is too good that you just can't pass up on it. Even though Tyreek Hill's ceiling might be a little bit better, so I'd still lean Diggs if I had to choose between the two of them over on a straight up trade or any dynasty trade like that. We do have a question by Andrew here in the chat. If the Jets get Aaron Rodgers, what would be the ceiling for Garrett Wilson and Elijah Moore? Let's spin Andrew's question into our next question here. In terms of younger wide receiver, would you prefer Garrett Wilson, who, let's say he gets Aaron Rodgers, or Jalen Waddle in Dynasty right now? Who is up next? Kyle, you're up on this one, right? Who would you prefer? Garrett Wilson with, let's say, a tie to your buddy Aaron Rodgers, or Jalen Waddle?
Yeah, being tied to Rodgers might be enough that it makes it Wilson, I think, because the one thing is, and I think we're all kind of in agreement here, we all still think Hill is the number one receiver there. We'd all rather, even in Dynasty, still have Hill over Waddle, which isn't always the case. I've seen some startups where Waddle is being taken first. But yeah, I think Wilson seems like he's the clear alpha on that team. So the Aaron Rodgers clear alpha usually gets fed a ton of targets. So from a sheer volume standpoint, that's the one thing that Waddle's had has been volume. I think that kind of goes away, and I think I would take Wilson. But to me, right now, even like, let's say it's Mike White, I don't think they're that far off. Wilson's done pretty well, as long as it hasn't been Zach Wilson. I think he even had a good game with Zach Wilson. It seemed like Elijah Moore was really if he had Zach Wilson, he was awful. If he had anyone else, he was good. Well, actually, he didn't even do that well with Flacco. It was really just Mike White. That was the only guy that unlocked Elijah Moore. I do want to answer Andrew's question quickly, in that my theory is, if Aaron Rodgers gets traded to the Jets, Elijah Moore is going to the Packers. They are giving Jordan Love, Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Elijah Moore as his receiving core for the rest of his rookie contract, and that's how they're going to build around him with those young receivers. I think the Jets are looking for any excuse they can to get off Elijah Moore without seeming like they're the ones being desperate and giving into his trade demands. But if whatever you're going to plan to give to the Packers, if you could give less picks and give Elijah Moore instead, I think the Jets might do that. So to Andrew's point, I think it's a moot point, because Elijah Moore's ceiling will be low because he'll be tied to Jordan Love. It'll be low. It'll be lower than it is now. Yeah,
I like it. All right.
To ramble on. I'm the reason this episode's going so long. I'm so sorry, guys. Thanks for having me. Welcome back to the Dynasty Coaches, everyone.
Jibs, over to you, my friend. How do you feel about it? Let's say Garrett Wilson with an Aaron Rodgers, or Jalen Waddle. Do you think maybe those finishes switch? Maybe Garrett Wilson is the wide receiver 8, Jalen Waddle is the wide receiver 19.
I still prefer Garrett Wilson. Not to bank on your boy. Your man Waddle has a drop problem. He needs to correct that. Meanwhile, Garrett Wilson, man, he's making sure catches and traffic. He's doing everything on the field, and he's everyone says, there's no one on there. Elijah Moore, as much as we all kind of vaunted him this season, Garrett Wilson's that guy on the team, and it's clear. And the ball is going to him. They made it a point, hey, get the ball to Garrett Wilson, and they got the ball to him. So, in Dynasty, I'm going to take Garrett Wilson. Waddle's phenomenal talent. The guy is wide receiver 8 this year, and I think it was a so-so year because he wasn't as consistent. So, if with Aaron Rodgers, man, that's to the moon, baby.
I love it.
To the
moon. To the moon. All right. Coach John, over to you. Again, similar question here with Wilson and Waddle. How do you feel in this situation? Obviously, if Rodgers is there, is that really do you believe that Wilson right now, straight up with Waddle, is that even for you, or who's better?
Yeah, I think straight up in Dynasty, it's pretty close. Garrett Wilson, Jalen Waddle. If you were to give me Aaron Rodgers, then I would be heavy on the Wilson side, because then not only do I have long-term sort of dynasty value with Garrett Wilson, but I know I get 2023 points because he's tied to Aaron Rodgers too. So I think that would kind of be the tipping point for me. But even as it constitutes, like the other guy said, Garrett Wilson's not that far off from Jalen Waddle in my mind. I mean, they're both probably top 15, top 10. They're really good. Garrett Wilson showed to be an absolute dominator when he's on the field, and they do it differently. Garrett Wilson's going to be the guy who probably gets 12 plus targets a game and gets fed volume and, hits some big plays every once in a while. Whereas, Jalen Waddle is going to be a little bit less volume, but definitely big plays, take a slant to the house kind of touchdown sort of kind of guy. So I always, I like to lean a little bit more towards volume. Same with, go back to the Diggs and Tyreek Hill argument. I chose Diggs. I like the security of volume and things like that. And so I think Garrett Wilson kind of falls in that same archetype of like, yeah, he's going to see double-digit targets every chance he gets. And, you know, you hope he has a 13 touchdown year and you're sitting pretty with a top 5 guy.
All right. I'm going to hijack the show a little bit because just talk about like how my wide receiver tiers work. And I think like, you know, Hill, Diggs, and I can even throw Devontae Adams, even Cooper Kupp, assuming he comes back from injury, is like these older but elite producers is kind of like, to me, like the back end wide receiver 1. And then like, I think that goes to like wide receiver 9 with Cooper Kupp. And then from there, it's, to me, wide receiver 10 all the way down to like 16, 17 is a big tier of a lot of the younger guys. And I'd say both Waddle and Wilson are in that tier. So the idea is you could even rank them Wilson ahead of Waddle right now. But I think to John's point, and Jib said this too, like they're super close. Now I want to just add to this question because like just something John said at the end kind of made me think, if Rodgers is with Garrett Wilson, are we taking him ahead of Tyreek Hill and Diggs? Like, does he jump all the way to potential top 5 dynasty wide receiver being tied to Aaron Rodgers, even if it is just for a season or 2?
Oh, man.
I would say so. I mean,
it would be
not top 5, but top 10.
He would be a lot because, like I said, now not only do you know that you're going to get 8 years of a career out of Garrett Wilson, but I'm going to also get a freaking great 2023. So like, I know I'm getting points. I know I'm getting points next season. And then I'm probably going to get a pretty decent career out of the guy the rest of the year. So yeah, he'd be high if in this dream world where Aaron Rodgers is a Jet, like, yeah, he'd go pretty high in dynasty startups and things like that. I have a feeling he'd be probably a back of the first, like kind of pick. Like it'd be crazy how high he'd go. Early second.
I think I might be willing to take him over Hill, and that would put him at wide receiver 6 for me. And then I've got Amon-Ra St. Brown as wide receiver 5 right now in Dynasty. Like Garrett Wilson with Aaron Rodgers, that might be enough for me to be top 5, where he's right just right behind your boy AJ Brown there, Jibs.
Love that. Where were we? Oh yeah. On to our next question here, guys. All right. Obviously, Gabriel Davis was the talk of the last offseason as the big jump guy, and he's going to be a top 10 wide receiver like Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill was. But he obviously didn't finish that way. Wide receiver 27 on the season. Very disappointing second half of the year. He showed a couple games where we had that big playability that he showed us in the divisional round in 2021. But obviously, it really didn't step up to that nature this year. Is Gabriel Davis ever going to reach that high-end wide receiver 2 value or low-end wide receiver 1 value, or is it just not there?
If it was going to happen, it would have happened this year. And I love Davis, especially since a certain Coach Steve, I guess I won a contest, but I'll say he gifted me a signed Gabe Davis jersey. So I'm a huge Gabe Davis fan. Thanks for that, Steve. If it was, he didn't draw very many targets this year for a team that was lacking receivers outside of Diggs. If he was ever going to be that, true wide receiver 2, it would have happened this year. I'd imagine Buffalo's investing in the position next offseason. And that might be why, to our earlier conversation, they might re-sign Devin Singletary because he's so cheap. Because I don't think that Singletary's done enough that on the market, he's breaking down doors and someone's going to, we're paying Devin Singletary to be our workhorse. He'll be so cheap that I could see the Bills running it back with this running back room so they can spend more money at the wide receiver position. I don't know if there's any big name free agents out there. They steal Jacoby Myers from the Patriots. Sorry, John.
That'd be fun.
Have them.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Because I feel like that's the type of receiver that would really help or Allen to a certain extent, and Diggs. Like it helps with the spacing there. Maybe it allows you to use Diggs more downfield, and maybe that helps Diggs' upside to a certain extent.
Right.
With, Myers playing as a slot receiver. But anyway, I'm rambling. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. Yeah, I think Kyle's right. Like if it happened, it would have happened this year. I think the Buffalo GM, I'm drawing a blank on his name. The other day kind of tipped his hat.
Brandon Bean, I think.
Yeah. Kind of tipped his hat to kind of say like, look, Josh Allen's not on a rookie contract. Diggs is not on a big contract. Like we can't keep this together forever. Like you know what I'm saying? He was talking about sort of the luxury of Joe Burrow being on a rookie contract and Chase being on a rookie contract. He said, he goes, well, when you have to pay your top players a lot of money, other pieces have to come and go. When Gabe Davis is due money, they're not going to have enough to pay him. So he's going to be somewhere else, 100%. Like, so, if it didn't happen now, I don't think it's going to happen in Buffalo. So maybe he gets a second contract somewhere else and becomes kind of a big piece there, but who knows? And so that's a lot of what ifs for Dynasty in my mind. Like, I think we needed to see it to buy in. I'm kind of out on Gabe Davis. I think he's a great boom bust flex. He'll have big weeks, obviously, because he's tied to Josh Allen and he is super fast. He's talented, but I just can't go, hey, there's 2-3 weeks in a row where you're seeing 4 targets. It's like, I can't do that. Like, I just can't, because then you're playing this game, because then you have to play these lineup decisions week in and week out. Like, do I start Gabe Davis? And the week you don't start him, that's the week he has 140 and 2. And then, like, you're kicking yourself. So the next week you put him in again and he goes, 2 for 14. And you're like, all right, well, what the heck? Like, this sucks. So, it's just hard to kind of navigate a team with those types of players. And so I'd trade him away in Dynasty. I don't really want much to do with him. And I don't know what his future in Buffalo really looks like. I just don't, I don't think they're gonna, I don't think that he did enough, to Kyle's point, where Buffalo says, look, we got to extend him. We got to keep him around. He didn't even have like a Mike Williams-esque sort of season to him, where like even Mike Williams put up 12 touchdowns one year and a little over 1,000 yards the next year. So like the Chargers were like, okay, we can piece this together with Keenan Allen. Like Gabe Davis still hasn't even done enough for them to buy in. So why should I buy in?
James, what about you, buddy?
You guys said it all. He's boomer bust wide receiver too, man. Like Coach Steve's been banging the drum for like 2 years about this guy, and like I finally bought on this year. I'm one of throw in all the chips I have. So it's sad though, because like he's playing in a good offense. I just don't know how it doesn't kind of mesh up, because like when he's a streaky guy, like he gets a touchdown, he finds 2 a game, and then like you're going 3 weeks without one, and then you wait to the playoffs, and guess what? He has like 3 in one game. Go figure. So like it's just the most wildest thing. So like hopefully like he finds better pasture somewhere else and blossoms to a good player. But like I just don't see it in fantasy. I just can't see it in Buffalo, like I said, unless they change their offensive philosophies.
I just looked up. I'm shocked he had 93 targets last year. That seems a lot higher than
93 targets. Yeah, well, actually is a lot.
How many? He only caught 48 passes. Like
I was gonna say,
That's the issue.
And like
the Mike Williams school.
Well, that's the thing. It's tough catches to get, right? It's all downfield. If you get it, it's high upside. It's a big play, but it's just it's so hard to bank on that, even when he's getting targets. I'm looking at, like you mentioned, in the fantasy playoffs. I'm looking at his 3 fantasy playoff games: 3 for 45 and a touchdown, 3 for 39, which came with 10 targets. So, like even when you got the volume, if you played him. He missed championship week, so you couldn't have played a championship week. He didn't even play that week. Oh wait, we know what happened that week. Never mind. Sorry, my mistake.
That's okay.
But yeah, like so even he didn't get enough targets, but even when he did get the targets, he wasn't making the catches. So it's, I guess to my earlier point though, John, he might re-sign with Buffalo because he'll be so cheap, because no team's gonna want him. Like he might just end up back there, but I think it's okay to buy Gabe Davis this offseason if you know.
Great time to buy Gabe Davis.
You don't want to pay wide receiver 2 price, but if you're just going to get him as I'll play him the weeks when the Bills are in a close game, when it's a high over under, I'll play him those weeks and this chance that it's a shootout type game, but you don't have to play him every week. That might be the ideal spot. So you don't want him to buy him you don't want him as a starter price for a fantasy lineup. You want him as a backup price. It's a little bit like the Mac Jones earlier, right? You don't want Mac Jones as your QB2 if you have to play him every week. You want him as your QB2 if you've got a good third QB that you can flip in and out with Mac Jones weekly when the matchups aren't good.
Yeah,
I'd be buying Gabe Davis everywhere I can this offseason. This is a terrible rookie wide receiver class. There's only a handful of guys that are actually really, I think, that great. If you can get Gabe Davis for a mid-second round pick right now, I'm still buying into it. He is going into the final year of his contract. The man's going to find a way to step up. I know they might bring someone else there in Buffalo. I don't know if they're going to even have the money to be able to afford that. There's obviously still issues on this whole team in a general sense. They're still going to be throwing the ball a ton. I don't think they're going to bring an elite running back in to make it so that they're going to run the ball constantly. You know, it was a bad year for him. Things didn't work out right. Doesn't mean it can't not work out right next year, honestly. And I think in a contract year, Gabe Davis is going to find a way to step up, just like Mike Williams did in his contract year to actually get another contract. I think Gabe Davis can do that. He's talented enough. It didn't pan out this year. And remember, Josh Allen hurt his elbow at some point midseason. I don't think the deep ball was there the same way we had in the first half of the season, where we had 4 games with 15-plus fantasy points. He didn't have a single game over 11 fantasy points in the second half. So I think Gabe Davis has a chance still to bounce back. Again, he's a boom or bust wide receiver. You have to know that grabbing him. He's not going to be a guy that's going to be consistent like Diggs. But I think those big games are still there. I just think with Josh Allen's injury early in that midseason, I think it really hurt Gabe Davis's value for the rest of the year, and people have a sour taste. And if you can give away a mid-second to get Gabe Davis, I'm still willing to do that. So that's how I feel about Davis. All right, so let's get over to the tight ends. Let's finish this thing out for the night. This one's going to be real easy, honestly. It's basically, guys, which of these tight ends are you most attracted to pick up in Dynasty, to grab, to have on your team, to buy maybe? Which of these tight ends, Dawson Knox, Mike Gesicki, the backups in Miami, Durham Smythe, Hunter Long. I mean, you have the Jets, Tyler Conklin, CJ Uzomah, Jeremy Ruckner, and you obviously have the New England duo, Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith. Which one of these tight ends, real quickly, guys, would you want in Dynasty?
I dare someone to answer Durham Smythe.
Blocking tight end. Do not do that to yourself.
My answer is Mike Gesicki, because he's going to be a free agent. So he's got like the most potential to change his situation, because I don't really love where any of these guys are in terms of their situation. Like Knox is great. It's the same problem with Gabe Davis, though. It's so low floor, high upside on a kind of a weekly basis. I think Knox, it's not so much with yards, it's more just touchdowns. Like he can you know, he's tied to Josh Allen. He can get 2 touchdowns any week, but if he doesn't, he's probably not doing much for your lineup, in fact, hurting you. So I think Gesicki, and assuming that whatever team gets him will actually want to use him as a receiving tight end. So, you know, he's going to go to the highest bidder probably. And the team that wants to pay him the most probably wants to use him as a receiver. Like, I think some team is thinking, oh, blocking tight end, let's overpay for Mike Gesicki, because that'll be our answer for a blocking tight end that we want to invest so highly in. So I'd say buy Gesicki now with the chance that maybe, you know, I've thought about this. Do
lines.
Do the franchise tag tight ends from last year just switch spots? The Dolphins don't have Gesicki. They go sign Dalton Schultz, and then Gesicki ends up in Dallas. That'd be a great spot that I think would elevate him above everyone here in this group for sure. So Gesicki would be my answer. That wasn't so quick. I'm sorry. But it was about the Dolphins, so I'm sure Steve appreciated it.
He's leaving Miami. I don't like it. But,
yeah, sure. I'm talking about the guy leaving Miami, so I guess that's not so good.
This doesn't fit our scheme, unfortunately. So, Jibs, John, how do you guys feel? Anyone outside of Mike Gesicki, or is it Mike?
No, I'm the same. Gesicki for the same reasons. There's a chance that he gets a change of scenery and gets elevated. Other than that, the rest of these guys are just, you know, ho-hum, whatever, tight ends. I could care less.
Thing I just thought of, if Jacoby Myers does leave, does that mean Hunter Henry becomes a lot more of a focus in that passing game? Maybe he's a buy, but then again, you're banking on Myers leaving and them not bringing anyone better. So
I think the offense would be so sort of sluggish at that point that the upside for Henry even still wouldn't be that great, because you become such a run heavy, maybe throw the ball 25 times a game. Like that offense would look so different if they don't re-sign Jacoby Myers and don't re-sign anybody. If they go rolling in with, you know, Tyquan Thornton and company, you'd be like, it would look pitiful. As weird as the offense looked this year, it would look even worse.
Tight ends with high upside offenses just to score touchdowns. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like
now I guess the fear of Gesicki, he might go to a bad offense, even though they're willing to give him targets, but it might be a bad scoring offense. That's kind of the only risk. Like I said the Cowboys, but he may not go to the Cowboys. In fact, that's probably not a likely destination if you look at the Cowboys' finances. So
it's funny. I think it's just pass catching tight ends like that tend to be like a luxury pick to teams, where if they're gonna pay him, it's like we know what we're bringing him in to do. You know, kind of almost like a what's his name to the Vikings.
Hawkinson.
Hawkinson. Yeah. Like they knew, they were like, this is a luxury that we need. Like we kind of complete with our wide receiver. We're good everywhere else. Let's bring in a pass catch tight end because that's going to be the last piece of the puzzle. If Gesicki goes and signs anywhere, it's going to be a situation like that where a team goes, look, we're already good at wide receiver. We're good at running that. Like the last little piece we need is just a kicker at tight end. So I wouldn't be, I have a feeling whatever team goes to, the offense is going to be probably pretty good.
You almost hope they don't have like a clear wide receiver too, where he can be like the clear second option. That might almost be the highest upside thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he that's what you want. I mean, you want him to be a complementary piece to an alpha. I mean, that's ideal. It's again, it's rare that tight ends can be alphas on teams. You can name 5 or 6 in the history of the game that have done it. So, and it's always funny to me, people, when they're like, oh, there's, so-and-so doesn't have to compete with any wide receivers for targets. I'm like, you know how hard it is for a tight end to be like the focal point of an offense and get 15 targets a game and be productive? It's like not common. It's not like, it's rare that happens. So I think best case scenario is Gesicki goes somewhere where, there is a dominant alpha. He can just be a red zone complementary piece and just score.
Field stretcher too. He's pretty fast.
Yeah. He has ability. Yeah. I mean, he has ability. He has a tight
like
end.
A team that's got like a really good possession receiver. He almost like, you don't like, it'll be like 2 different target areas. So it's like, okay, when this guy's not open, I go to the second level. Like that would be kind of like an ideal scenario. So like
Cardinals. Cardinals just got Trey McBride, but I wonder.
They pick a tight end,
especially if they do trade away DeAndre Hopkins. That could be like he could almost play like a Hopkins role. Like he can almost take that over without
middle of the field possession kind of guy, downfield a little bit. Yeah,
the spot is the Lions.
That's true. No Hawkinson. Yeah, that's a good point.
Lions are a good one too. I mean, they're an ascending offense.
They've got the Alpha Nometer already.
Yeah, got some money.
Jameson. Yeah,
sure.
Be fun.
Sure.
That'd be fun.
Mm-hmm. That's a good one, Jim.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will wrap this thing up tonight, guys. Great first episode back. Obviously, this was a lot of fun. A lot of great information, guys. Kyle, we'll start with you, my friend. Anything you want to get? Anything you want to shout out, or anything in general? The floor is yours, my friend.
It's funny, shout out. I've been kind of showing them off both through this live stream. So I'm representing the 2 spots that I do a podcast and live stream with. So first off, I referenced full press coverage earlier. So I have 2 podcasts with full press coverage. I've got the Full Press Fantasy Pod shown on the t-shirt. We've been doing episodes through the playoffs. I think we're going to take a break this week, but do our Super Bowl preview next week on that. So check for that. And then Dynasty content all through the offseason. Really looking forward to that. Full Press Packers will return this week. We've been off since last year. I think we had an episode I think it was previewing the Dolphins game. That was the last, that might have been the last episode we did. So we'll come in and preview the Super Bowl real well. And do have off-season content there. And I do write articles of Full Press coverage. I think right now my most recent article is my Dynasty rankings. Working on my rookie running back film grades right now. And I'll try and get that out within, sometime in February, I'm hoping. So people can see like which running backs I believe in, at least right now, before we're getting draft capital and I'll of course keep those rankings up to date all through the offseason. And then at Going for Two live, I'm also do 2 live shows with Going for Two. Thursdays, the Dynasty Gambit. So that'll be right now every Thursday until we eventually split off into every second week. So we'll be every Thursday until I think February 9th. And then after that, it'll be every second week. So skip the 16th and then alternating weeks. So every Thursday at 8 p.m. on the Going for Two Live network. And then again, once that post Super Bowl comes in the offseason programming at Going for Two, I also have a show called Press Coverage. And that'll be every 2 weeks on the Going for Two Live network. So again, subscribe on YouTube, and really appreciate the coaches letting me come on for so long. It feels like you guys always occasionally will get like an hour 20 long episode, and I feel like I'm always the one that's on, so I common denominator. But it's like it's a season premiere, right? Like you see shows do that, like 2-hour season premiere, like we'll just show the first 2 episodes the first week, and I guess that's not really a streaming thing, that's more of a TV thing. I've been showing my age, aren't I?
Hey, maybe people are sitting there watching us constantly, so I like it. Andrew, thank you so much. Great show. Glad I found it. Glad you found it too. We'll be back every Monday. I'll talk about that in a second. Coach John, anything you want to say before we get going?
Nope, I got absolutely nothing. Follow me on Twitter at FTLS_JBats. I like to drink and talk about football. So yeah, interact with me there on Twitter. And listen, like I said, the off season is my favorite time to collaborate with content creators, work with different people in the industry. You know, it should be a good time. Don't just shut off your fantasy football brain. If you want to take it serious, if you want to have a leg up against your buddies, this is the time to really dig in and do your research. And so you're prepared. 2023 season starts now. You gotta know your stuff. So tune in, fantasy coaches. We'll take good care of you, and find me. I'll probably be on a bunch of other shows and doing the rounds, typical off season. So if you see me on your friend's favorite podcast, that's why, because I whore myself out for the fantasy coaches.
Okay, so it's not a clone.
No.
Okay.
It's just me going around, talking running backs probably. So
Love it. And
Love
Coach
the
Shivs, my friends, what do we got?
Go Birds. That's it.
We'll say it again next week too. Go Birds. And of course, guys, again, thank you for tuning in and listening tonight. This was a lot of fun. Obviously, talking Dynasty content on the off season here. Easier way for us to actually be able to actually look up information, do the research, than in the season where it's all mayhem back and forth within 24 hours. We got to give you something. So this gives us more time to actually give you guys good content and be able to help you guys get ready for your Dynasty offseason or obviously your 2023 season. So again, we'll be back every Monday around 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time doing this on YouTube. We'll have it live available to listen afterwards on YouTube or Spotify or any other place where you listen to your podcast. And again, thank you all for listening. Tune in until next time, guys. We'll be back. Have a good one.